high and dry without a vendor, or at least not the lowest vendor to award our contract to. So it's basically an assurance that the winning vendor will undertake the city contract under the terms and conditions of the bid. Okay. Now there are two distinctions that are important to remember. For city-funded projects, you must hold your bid firm for 60 days. For federally funded contracts, and when I say federally funded, if there's even $1 of federal money that's being contributed to pay for a project, then the hold firm period is 90 days. And a bid can be withdrawn based on a mistake, but there has to be a written request made to the chief procurement officer asking to withdraw the bid, and then it's up to the CPO's discretion whether or not that request will be granted to withdraw the bid. Now, I went through that entire slide, and I think I need to explain a little detail for you. First of all, what do I mean by hold firm? Hold firm means that you're going to stay committed to your bid for 60 days if it's city funded, 90 days if it's federally funded. So say, for example, you submit a bid and 61 days go by on a city funded project. What does that mean? It means that we haven't come back to you yet, if you're the lowest bidder. If we haven't come back to you yet, and say on the 62nd day we come back to you and we say, we'd like to award you the contract, then you have the option at that point to say, no, I'm not interested, and you get to walk away. Now, if you are approached on the 59th day, and we tell you we'd like to award you the contract, and you say, I'm not interested, and you try to walk away, there's a penal sum, we call it, and basically what that is that's your bid bond. Okay, so when you submitted that bid, with that bid you submitted a bid bond. That bid bond was an assurance that you're going to hold firm for 60 days. If it's city funded, 90 days if it's federally funded. And if we award to somebody else, or say, for example, we got to that 62nd day and you didn't have to hold firm anymore and you wanted to walk away, in either of those instances, you get to walk away and you get your bid. There's no penalty. You don't forfeit the bid bond. You walk away without any type of penal sum or any type of loss. Now, one might ask, how do I know if it's city funded or it's federally funded? It'll be in your specifications. Now, I got to take a step back and go back to that higher level view again. Some folks are unaware of what specifications are. If you're totally new to city contracting, you might not be aware of what specifications are. When we put together a project for ultimately for a contract award, it all starts with specifications. The department that is ultimately going to be your client or your customer helps draft those specifications. And what specifications are they are written details of what it is, whether it's good or services. They specify what it is that the department wants to buy. So for example, say the Chicago Police Department wants to buy police cars. They will draft specifications and send them to us, and those specifications will detail what type of police cars they want to buy, perhaps how many, or an estimate of how many. It'll say how big the tires need to be, whether it's 2 doors or 4 doors, how much equipment needs to be on the police car, maybe to meet laws that establish what police cars need to be geared up with. So there's all these details, and the departments are oftentimes the true experts in what it is they need, right? We're the experts in putting contracts together, but they are oftentimes the experts in the details of what they want to buy. So they draft the specifications. Those specifications will ultimately get to us, and they will be joined with standard terms and conditions and maybe some revised terms and conditions. And those terms and conditions include bonding requirements. So that's a tip that I encourage upon vendors all the time. When you come in, if you're interested in a bid opportunity and you come in to the bid and bond room and you pick up a bid package and you open it up, read all the documents thoroughly. And part of those documents will be your specifications. Read them Every word, every letter, because when you decide to submit a bid, you have to give us, quite frankly, what we want exactly the way we want it. And that's not just in the delivery end of it. That's not just once you have the contract and you're delivering the goods or services. That responsibility of giving us what we want the way we want it starts during the bidding process. So read the specifications. Everywhere there's a form that says it has to be filled out and submitted with your bid, make sure you fill out every space of that bid and submit it, of that form and submit it with your bid. If there's a bonding requirement, make sure you have that bond and that it's included with your bid. And why do you need to give us what we want the way we want it? It's because, remember the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act? It requires for the majority of our contracts that are competitively bid that contracts go to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. We all know what the lowest bidder means. It means the lowest priced bid, right? But what are the two other qualifications? That you're responsive and responsible. It means that let's take a step a little forward. What's responsibility? It means you're presently capable of delivering what we want the way we want it. So you have the equipment, you have the personnel, you're able to deliver what we're asking for at the time of bid. And then the last characteristic was responsiveness. And responsiveness means you're giving us what we want the way we want it, including bid documents filled out the way we asked for. So if a bid form requires the signature of the vendor and you don't sign it, that might be a basis for rejecting the bid in its entirety for being not responsive. If the specification or the bid package says you must submit a bid bond, and even though you're the lowest bidder, you don't include a bid bond, we might have to reject your bid as being not responsive. And it's a shame for you as the vendor because you lose the opportunity to say you're the lowest priced vendor. It's a shame because you took that time to prepare the bid, to come down, submit the bid, and you didn't get the work that you put all that time into trying to get. And it's a shame for us because then we have to go perhaps to the second lowest bidder, and now by law, because we have to do that, we're spending a little more than we otherwise would have. So it's actually a shame for us too, because we'd like to award to vendors, but we do have to follow the law. We have integrity in our system, and if there is a bid that is not responsive, we might be mandated to reject it, and that oftentimes is a shame. So remember, your bid bond is an assurance that you're going to follow through on the project. You have to hold firm for either 60 or 90 days. You look at the specifications, you can see whether it's city funded or federally funded. That'll affect the hold firm period. After the hold firm period, you can withdraw without any type of penalty. You withdraw too early, you forfeit your bid bond, unless there's a mistake, but that mistake has to be pled in writing to the chief procurement officer, and it's up to her discretion whether to approve the request or not. Now, we're going to talk about performance and payment bonds, but I want to, again, distinguish between insurance and bonds, okay? Because performance and payment bonds sometimes sound like insurance. People think they're insurance, but they're not truly insurance. And they protect the city like insurance, but they do act in different, performance and payment bonds do act in different ways. So, really quick, we all know what insurance is. On your businesses, you probably have insurance coverage for maybe general liability, maybe if you have motor vehicles in a fleet or motor vehicles servicing clients, you probably have those motor vehicles insured. I hope you do. You might have workers' comp insurance. That's all insurance that protects when there's a type of liability that's created. And it could be as a result of accident. There are a variety of reasons why you have liability coverage. But insurance really covers those types of business liabilities. Now, a performance and payment bond is a little bit different. And by the way, I did give out a handout earlier, so I will make sure everybody has one. And for those who are watching online, if anyone would like to get a copy of a form performance and payment bond, I'd be happy to email it, and you can receive it at home as well. But I've given out a copy of a performance and payment bond. It's not filled out, but it gives you sort of the template language that is involved. The key to a performance and payment bond is to understand it actually serves two functions. It assures or provides an assurance, remember not insurance, but an assurance, that projects will be completed. That's the performance aspect of the performance and payment bond. And then it also ensures that vendors or suppliers that typically as subcontractors assist with the project, if they perform work, that they get paid once the prime contractor receives payment. Because what can happen sometimes is there is the occasion on public and private projects where prime contractor bids, wins the project, brings in subcontractors. With the subcontractors, performs work. Subcontractors sit back and wait to get paid. Prime contractor gets paid by the city and then doesn't pay its obligations down to the subcontractors. And what happens then? The subcontractors might have a claim against either the prime contractor or maybe against other vendors that are involved in the project. But at the end of the day, disputes arise, and the city doesn't want to be tied up in disputes. So we have performance and payment bonds for that reason. Now, the one question you have is, when is it required? Now, I did say at the earlier part of the session that bid bonds are going to be relevant to almost everybody that's involved in city business. Performance and payment bonds, there is a narrower group of vendors that are going to be affected or that are going to be involved in performance and payment bonds. Construction projects are primarily where you're going to see performance and payment bonds come into play. How are you going to know whether a performance and payment bond is required? Always look to the specs, the specifications. So it'll say, just like whether or not a bid bond is required, the specifications will say whether a performance and payment bond is required. It'll also tell you how much the performance and payment bond has to be taken out for. Now, when is it typically required in construction? Typically for projects that are $100,000 or more in value. And what's the amount of the bond you have to go out and get? It's typically $100,000 or 10% of the total project value, whichever is greater. Now, by the way, I'm not making this up as I go along. It's actually in the Chicago Municipal Code. And so if you have a question afterwards, again, just reach out to me. I'll be glad to point you in the direction of the section of the Chicago Municipal Code that spells it out right down to the detail. It's actually not hard to find, by the way. If you go, there's an authorized publisher of the Chicago Municipal Code. That publisher is online at amlegal.com, AMLEGAL.com. And if you go there, it's very easy to follow. It'll give you, up in the upper menu of that website, you can click on codes, and then it'll give you a list of jurisdictions by state, and then you can click through there and get through local jurisdictions. Chicago is listed. You click on that, and then it'll take you to the code. And all you gotta do on the left side of the screen is look for 2-92. That's the section that authorized, that basically creates our department, gives us our authority. And within that section of 292 in the index, you can see titles for bonding and for sureties. And you click on that, it'll give you a great deal. If you're having any trouble, though, reach out to me, and I'll be glad to guide you through the Chicago Municipal Code to see the details. But remember, it's going to be for $100,000 or 10% of the total contract value, whichever is greater. When it is required, you're going to submit that bond typically with your bid documents. Now, there might be a period where you're allowed to submit the bid after the bid submittal date. But remember, look to the specifications. It's going to tell you pretty much everything you're going to need to know, right down to these details. And you're going to want to do exactly what the specifications or what the solicitation tells you to do. Remember, the bid documents always provide notice of whether or not a performance and or payment bond is required for a particular project or contract. And then one note additionally I want to point out, it's, I wouldn't say typical, but it does occur where a performance and payment bond may be required on work service contracts as well. So it's the one service area where performance and payment bond might be required. Work services, for example, where you might see performance payment bonds, certain type of landscape work might involve performance payment bond. Because sometimes landscape work, you start getting into not just clipping landscape and trimming grass. Sometimes landscape involves actually, breaking down and rebuilding certain types of structures involved in the landscape. So it's when you get into that type of landscape work, you might see performance payment bonds. You may see performance payment bonds, for example, in security guard services in certain instances. So don't think just because you're sitting here and you're not in construction that a performance payment bond may not apply to you or it doesn't apply to you. Read those specifications on the project you're interested. Make sure it doesn't apply to you. And then if it does, make sure you get the performance and payment bond. Now, insurance, I always want to treat both different, treat them separately. Insurance, I myself can't think of an example where insurance is not required. So don't think just because a performance payment bond is not required that insurance is not required. When you look through the specifications, liability insurance will be in a separate section than performance and payment bonds. You will almost, again, I can't think of an example where we don't ask for insurance. We have an obligation by law to make sure the city is protected from certain liabilities. Now, I'm going to take some questions and answers, but I'm going to do so after I go through this handout that I've given out, because I talked extensively about being responsive and responsible, and I said part of being responsive is filling out documents exactly the way they're asked for, right? And this is an example of a performance and payment bond. It's blank, it's not filled out, but it is a sample. It has boilerplate language. I give this to you for a couple reasons. One is I want you to get familiar with the language, because if you need a performance and payment bond, you're going to be one of the parties to this agreement. There's three parties to a performance and payment bond. There is a surety, there is the city, and there is the vendor. So get familiar with the language. And when you fill it out, keep in mind a couple things. We need to have your name disclosed on the top of the performance and payment bond, your address. The name of the surety has to be up top there in the blank. We have to know who the surety is that we're dealing with. And by the way, you have to deal with a surety that is authorized to issue performance and payment bonds, and that authority needs to be granted by the U.S. Treasury. So if you go to the Treasury Department's website, and if you, even just in the search bar, if you type in sureties, it'll pull up a list nationwide of sureties, and those sureties underneath, it'll have the abbreviations for every state that they are authorized to do business in. So you got to make sure that your surety that you're doing business with is authorized to do business or issue bonds in the state of Illinois. And by the way, I mean, this is relevant to even insurance, right? You want to make sure that the insurance companies you deal with are reputable and authorized to do business with generally in the state of Illinois and with the city of Chicago as well. Now underneath that, you do have to specify what the dollar amount of the performance and payment bond is. I told you what it's going to be. It's either going to be $100,000 or 10% of the contract value, whichever is greater. You have to also identify the date this performance and payment bond is issued, and you have to identify the project by contract and spec number, as well as project name, and that's project description. Now, just as a side note, and I talk more about this in detail at Doing Business with the City of Chicago and Procurement Fundamentals, those are some key numbers that you're going to want to start getting comfortable with as you do business with the city. I mentioned specifications start at the very beginning. The departments that are going to be your clients and your customers draft specifications that detail what it is that they want to buy. A specification number is attached to those specifications, and they follow that project to the day we stop doing business with the vendor that's awarded the contract. So whenever you're talking about a project, one of the most helpful ways is to reference it by specification number, especially if it hasn't been awarded yet. So if you see in the Chicago Sun-Times a project that's being advertised and you're interested in it and you have questions, and say you call the City of Chicago Department of Procurement Services, you say, I'd like to talk with somebody about, well, sometimes you might say, hey, oh, it's a project about construction work. Well, we have so many construction projects out there that if you just say, I'm calling about a construction project, it's not going to help us. And it's going to take a long time for you to get the information you need. And we'll do our best to get it to you fast, but it's going to cause us probably a little bit of trouble. If you call, and even if you narrow down the name, oh, it's road construction, that still doesn't help it very much. But if you know the specification number, which will be listed in the advertisement, I'm calling about specification number 29878. And then the person will be able to send you right to who it is that you're going to want to talk to, who's in charge of that project. Once the contract's awarded, a PO number is assigned to it, a purchase order number. And then you can also, once a contract is awarded, start referencing the project by PO number or spec number. But it's important to get used. And both numbers, to show the importance of those numbers, both numbers must be included on your performance and payment bond, along with the project description. Now, attached to your bond, and this is not attached to every performance and payment bond out there, we include our rider, which basically allows us as a city the option to take over the project ourselves if we want to, if the vendor fails, and just require the surety to pay us money instead of self-performing the project itself. So say, for example, there's a surety company on a bond, and we'll just, for illustration, let's say the Chicago Police Department wants to build a police station. So that it's a construction project. We have a performance payment bond. Let's say surety company, let's say Midwest Assurances is the surety company. They're on the bond. There's a vendor that's on the project. That vendor lays the foundation for the police station, gets the walls up, and suddenly, for a variety of reasons, maybe financial stress, maybe they found a project in another city they wanted to do, so they dropped this project, figuring they could go to another project and make more money. Whatever the reason is, they abandon the project. Well, we can't have a police station with no windows, no roof, sitting out, half complete. So what do? Based on the performance and payment bond, we have two options as a city. We can either go to the surety and say, if you'd like, bring in your contractors, and surety, you can come in and finish the police station as long as it's done according to the specifications, we're fine. And then the surety comes in, they complete the construction, and then they exercise any rights they have. Maybe they go after that vendor that they had the agreement with and try to recover their money. Our other option, according to the rider, is we could bring in our own contractors, alternative contractors, to complete the work, and then we go to the surety and we say to the surety, we've incurred this expense, finding replacement contractors, having them complete the work. Now you can give us the amount on the bond to reimburse us for our expenses and our losses. So that's kind of how the performance portion of a bond plays out. And it's very similar about how the payment part works out, right? Project, let's say, is complete. Let's say that police station example is the case. The police station's complete. We're happy at the moment. We pay the prime contractor, And then a short time later, we get a letter from the subcontractor saying, we did all this work and we haven't received a single dollar from our prime contractor. And so a performance and payment bond allows us to go to the surety and say, pay the subcontractors, and then you and the prime contractor can fight it out about who's actually responsible. But we're not going to sustain. We've already paid out the money for this project, and we're not going to pay out again just because your client, the prime contractor, didn't actually pay its subcontractor payments. So that gives you an idea of how a performance and payment bond plays out, how the payment aspect plays out specifically, and how it is differentiated from a bid bond. Bid bonds are, again, assurances at the front end of the project. With that being said, those are some of the bonding requirements. We talked a little bit about insurance as well, but those are the bonding requirements that are involved in the City of Chicago procurement process. With this subject matter, I talked about some of the higher level procurement process issues. For that reason, I encourage you to look at the workshop schedule and see what other workshops there are that are applicable to you. Because there's a lot more to the general process, and we do our best to present workshops that give you more detail about the process in general. We also, and it was mentioned earlier, I believe, all these workshops are streamed online. So in addition to this workshop that you can go back to and look at again, you can also go online and see the other workshops that are posted. You can either visit in person, as you did today, or you can view those workshops online as well. With that, I'll take some questions and answers if you have any. And if you have a question that's maybe very specific to your company or to a specific project that you don't feel is maybe of interest to everyone in the room, I'm happy to stick around and take questions and provide answers after the session. I'll be around as long as you need. So are there any questions?
How many days does it take for the So how many days does the procurement services, after the job is complete, what's the maximum amount of days that they could actually receive credit card payment, check payment?
So I believe the question is, and correct me if I'm incorrect, how long is it until the vendor receives payment for work complete?
Correct.
It'll be in your contract document.
Oh, okay. So it varies?
The period oftentimes in the contract is 60 days. It can be on occasion less. It can be on occasion more. We do our best. We work with the city's comptroller to make and the departments that are buying goods and services. We work to make sure that if there are any payment disputes, that we mediate them quickly, and we do our best working with the comptroller to get prompt payment to vendors complete. So it varies, but that's the general time period we'll see.
Is there a maximum amount of bid bonds you could have at one time?
So the question is there a maximum amount of bid bonds you can have at one time? You're going to have one bid bond per project. So to answer your question, if you're bidding on one project only, you're going to have one bid bond. And that's one bid bond that's going to assure us that you're going to follow through and stay committed to your bid. You might, however, and many vendors do, bid on multiple projects at any given time. There are vendors with several contracts that they're performing on at one time. And with the same regularity, they might be looking at multiple projects. They win some, they lose some, but they bid on multiple projects. You can't get credit for a bond on one project necessarily for another one you're bidding on. You have to treat each project like it's in a silo, see if it has bonding requirements, and then follow those bonding requirements without any expectation that another project is somehow going to qualify for the requirements of another project.
And then just one more general question. So the surety that you were talking about earlier, can you sum it up in a paragraph or so, what that means? Surety, yeah.
A surety is a financial institution that provides an assurance that performance will be completed and payment will be made to suppliers and subcontractors. So, and I hesitate to go this far, but it's similar to an insurance company. I mean, they are typically larger institutions, financial institutions, that have the capacity to take clients in and provide assurances that work will be complete, and they have the financial capacity to pay money out if one of their clients fails to perform. But I do want to keep it distinguished from, it's still not insurance, although some insurance companies do act as sureties as well, but that just means they have two lines of business. Generally, a surety company is someone that just provides basically a financial assurance that work's going to be performed and that payments are going to be made to contractors and to subcontractors and suppliers.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're all set. I will still, I'll stick around for a little bit just in case there's more questions. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you listening. And please reach out to me in the future if you have questions. Look forward to seeing and hearing from you in the future. Have a great day.